Hello friends, so this is Ashton. In this video I'm going to improve this application a little bit, and maybe if we have enough time we can complete the update and the delete functionalities for this application. So if you haven't watched my video for the part A and part B, so basically in part A we create the basic structure of this application, and we read data from our backend, which is a Google Sheet database like this, right? And in our video part B, we created a form like this. So basically we use this form to send the front end data to our backend. Okay, so our task here today is basically to improve this tool a little bit. All right, and also maybe if we have enough time, we can do the part for maybe a delete record from the front end, or we added some data from the front end. Okay, so basically that's it for this video, and let's get started. Let's close this application. So this is for the part B. So just like what we did for part B, let me make a copy of part B, so we can have a fresh start from part B, just in case I did something wrong, and we can start again. Okay, and let me rename this file to part C. Okay, let me try to deploy it. Since this is a new file, new object, new project, web app, new version, and execute admin, and anyone should have access to it. I think after authorization we should be able to start coding. Okay, just complete the process. Okay, should be done very quickly, and let's get the link, the web app link for the development. All right, here is our app. So few things need to be updated. First of all, this button and this title, it's a little ugly. So let's fix this part first. So where can I find it? I think it is in this index HTML file. So here, not here. Here is the title, and here is the button. Okay. So maybe I'd like to add a class here, call it deflex, and line content between. So if I do this, let me reload the page. I think I should have them not between, align content between. Let me check. Basically these are Bootstrap classes you can use. Okay, deflex. So I think I need to get rid of this class here. Align items, and if you go to the utilities and get this flex, so I'm actually want a layout like this. This one flag. So basically this is the title and this is the button. Okay, so I'm going to use, okay, it's not align, it's justify content between. I use the wrong class and align items center. All right, so I think this will fix the issue here. right? This looks like a little bit better. And I'd like to add another class. Maybe I need to give a little bit of margin, vertical margin, so we can have some space here and here. Okay, so if I reload the page, so as you can see, we have a little bit of space, separate them a little bit. So right now it looks like a little bit better. All right, so this is the first improvement I'd like to do here. And another improvement, I'd like to add a loading status bar here. So every time when the page is loading, I can see a status here. So to do that, I should be able to find there is a component, okay, it's called progress. Okay, I'd like to use a bar like this, but not with, I think this should be fine. So this one, let's make a copy of this one and go to our code. I'd like to put it here at the very top of our application, okay? So here, let's just paste the code here. And I need to change this a little bit. So this is 25%, I'd like to change it 100%. And for the value here, it's also 100. And for the height here, I'd like to change it to maybe 3 pixels. And I'd like to add that the if directive here. So this is basically the view directive. And we only show this progress bar here if the page is loading, okay? Because we have a loading in this, we have a loading. Where is my loading? Okay, so by default, the loading is false. Okay. So if the loading is true, you are going to see this bar here. But I don't want to put it in this container, so I'd like to move this container from the app, and I'd like to add another div here, place this container class, and wrap all of our other content in this container. Okay, so basically I am separating the progress bar from the container, because the container is not going to take the full width of your screen. Okay, so if you check your application, the container basically you have a margin here and here, but I want the progress bar to take the full screen. So that's why I move my progress bar here or status bar here like this. So let me test if I can see the progress bar. Okay, no progress bar here. Because this loading right now is false. So let me check here. So basically, when the application is created or the view object is created, view instance is created, I'd like to loading. Okay, I'd like to change. So basically, this dot loading is change it to true, right? And after we get the customer items from the backend, we'd like to stop this loading. So this loading false. Right now it's not loading, loading is done, right? And if some error, we also want the loading to be stopped. So if I try to as you can see here, we have a bar there. So every time I reload the page, I have a status bar. But I'd like to make some animation here, so we can add something like this, some class. So make it looks like it's like this, okay? Right, let's copy this and add it to our progress bar in this class. And this time, if I try to reload the page, so as you can see here, a little bit of animation there. So this looks very good, I have to say. And here, if I try to load a new page, I also want to show this loading, right? So to do that, basically when the page number is changed, we try to refresh the page, right? And here we are going to do the to change the value of the loading, change it to true or false like that. Just very similar to this to here when the page is loaded at the first time, right? So as you can see here, these two functions are actually exactly the same, right? This code here and the code here are actually the same. So we don't want to repeat ourselves, right? So let me make a copy of this code, and we go to our method, and I'd like to create a function here called getItems. So basically, we're going to get the customers from our backend. This is a function. This is a function to do that. So I only paste the codes here, and here I don't need to have all of this code, and I only call this function getItems, right? And also for this one, I can replace all of them with this function. So in this way, we just cleared our code a little bit. So basically, every time, if we want to refresh the page, we call this function getItems. So this function is going to reload the page, not actually reload the page. It's basically refetch the data from the backend and then refresh our front end. Okay, so right now, if I try to reload the page, I should be able to see the same result here. And if I try to go to another page, so as you can see here, you have a loading animation here. So I think this is cool. And another improvement here I'd like to do, I'd like to disable this button when the page is loading, because when the page is loading, I don't want any users to click on this button, right? So in Vue, that's easy to do. So I only need to go to find this button. Where is this button? I think it's here. So this is the button. So we need to do disabled. So basically, when the loading is true, I'm going to set the attribute for this disabled to true. So basically, when the page is loading, this button should be disabled, right? That's easy to understand, right? So as you can see, it's grayed out. And if I go to the page, it's also disabled, right? And I also want to disable these paginations here when the page is loading, right? So with the same method, we can copy this line of code and go to our pagination. So actually, I'd like to change this pagination a little bit. Maybe for a tag, I'd like to change it to a button. And for the class, I'd like to remove so this is the class for the page link, and disabled. So basically, if the page is loaded, it should be disabled, and if the page is 1, I also need to disable it, so I can get rid of this and change this A to button, and this is for the previous button, right? And we can update this one as well. So this is for the active, no need to change. V4, no need to change. Key, no need to change, and this is the, so I only need to change this button as well. Change it to button, remove this button, and let me see, disabled when it's loading. Okay, where is my disabled? So add a disabled when it's loading, right? not here. The color is different, so I need to add it here. So this is for the page, and this is another button here I'd like to change. And change this a tag to a button, and remove this class for button, and this class. I only need to add a disabled, I think. Page equal to pages, or is loading. Maybe I need to add it to here for this list item. So maybe let's check what's going on here. So looks like something is wrong. Invalid expression. Disable loading page equal to 1. What I did. Okay, loading, or seems like it's not working fine. It seems like it's not disabled, so maybe I need to apply this to if it's loading, it should be disabled. So this is applied to the button, and maybe this should be applied to the button as well. Disabled. And for this one, next page button. Okay, so let's try to reload. It's not disabled. That's pretty weird. So let me check in the components. We have a pagination. Let me check disabled and active states. Okay, I think I need to apply this disabled class. It should be the class to be applied. Not the attribute, it's a class. So where is my pagination and the class? So basically, if it's loading, or then we're going to add a class disabled, or we're going to just give it okay, so this is for the previous button, and this is for the buttons, page buttons, and let me get rid of this. And for the last one, let me copy of this class and put it here for the next page button, and page equal to pages, or the page is loading. Okay, so let me try to reload it again. So since this time is disabled and this button is not disabled, so as you can see, if I click, it's grayed out, right? But this part seems like it's not working. That's pretty good, weird class. Okay, not like this. So if it's loading, then we're going to apply a class for disabled. And if it's not loading, we don't apply this class to this button. So let me try to loading. That's pretty weird. plus. If it's loading, disabled. Okay. I'm not sure this can be used because I used this 2 times. Maybe I can add a class here, disabled. I can disable this button. Let me check if I can do it. Because here I'd like to apply an active class for the button, which is active. As you can click on this button when the page is loading. So I need to walk around here. This is not working. So even this index end, I can do something here. If loading, then apply disabled, else. So if loading, all right, so let me check if this time working or not. So it's, right now it's working. As you can see, I cannot click when the page is loading. Okay, and after the page is loaded, I can click, right? So I think this solved the issue for the pagination and some layout issue here, right? And another issue I'd like to improve here is for this customer form, right? After we submit the data here, I'd like to close this dialog, right? So this is the improvement I'd like to do. So let's go back to our code here. So in previous video, I'd like to close it, but I'm using a wrong way, okay? So if I try to find this great customer, basically here, when I try to close with this method, it's not working. So I'd like to create a function here to close the dialog. So function close dialog. So this function is like this. Const dialog is equal to document get element by ID. So if you want to make this function a little bit general, you can pass ID because you may have a different dialog in your application. So by default, I like to set it to new customer because for this application, we only have one form right now. So new customer form is the ID of our form, not the form, the dialog. So I use this ID, okay? So we can close any dialog with this function. To close it, we use a Bootstrap model get instance and put a dialog here as a parameter and hide. So this function is going to close the dialog, and we also can create a function to open or show dialog, right? Basically, we need only to change this hide to show. So these two functions, we can use it to open a dialog or basically close a dialog. Okay, so here we can close this dialog by replacing. So we call this function here to close the dialog. And this is our response. And when we click on this button, we also want to change the loading to true, right? And after we create it, we change it to false. So the loading status bar can be closed. And here too, if any errors, we also want to stop the progress bar at the top of our application, right? So I think this improved this form a little bit. So let me try to recreate, basically create a new customer. So I go to the last page. So if I create a new customer, if I create a customer, I should be able to see it here. But right now you should not see it. Let me do it. But we should see the progress bar. And after the record is created, we should have this dialog closed. So let's do a new customer, maybe for YouTube. youtube.at@gmail.com form, and description is YouTube, address is New York, the city and the states. Let's create. As you can see, we have a bar here. It seems like there's something wrong here. Cannot read property of null. Height. Okay. The function, something wrong with this function. Get element. New customer form. Okay, not from. All right, I think this time should fix this issue. So let's reload the page. As you can see, the new record has been created. Let's do it again. YouTube. Let's do, maybe this time not the YouTube, let's do another company for, maybe for Apple. Apple at google.com. That's weird. Apple at google.com. Apple Paris, France. Let's create. The page is loading, and as you can see here, the dialog is closed automatically after the record is created, right? And the Apple is created here. So after the item is created, I'd like to reload this page. Okay, so we can improve this a little bit. So create a customer. I'd like to create after we have the record created. After we close this dialog, I'd like to call this function get items, remember? So this function is going to get the items. Get the items from the backend. So we have a refresh page like that. So let me show you. So I'd like to go to the last page because the item is always added to the last item after the last item, so you can see the result here. So if I try to add a new customer here, this time maybe let's add a company called Uber at google.com. 123 123 321 Uber address. Okay, the city in China. Create. See, Uber is created, right? And if I click on this, so I have all of this information I just created for Uber. I'm not sure this is good or not. So basically, I'd like to maybe clear this content a little bit, right? So how can we do that? We can create a function. Okay, so here we already have a function here. So maybe show edit, show create form. So this function is going to show the form to create a new customer. Okay, so this is a function. So I'd like to basically get rid of the data from this form, right? So you know what? I'd like to make a copy of the data object we defined here, customer data. So every time the page is loaded, we're going to make a copy of this data, right? Not a reference. So JSON parse. You know what? I'd like to make a function to do that. So function copy object. So this is function copy object, and it's going to take our object. It could be array or object. So basically I'm going to return json.parse and json.string_find. So this function is going to make a real copy of your data. Okay. So here, if I didn't do a copy, if I do things like this, I say customer form data is, I assign this to this. Okay, so when I did some change in this form data, the original data, because this assign is basically a reference. There is no copy in your computer. In the memory, you only have one copy of this data. Okay, so if you change it somewhere, you change the only copy. Okay, so if I made a copy of this data, the change I did is only for this copy, and I'm not going to change the original data source. Okay, so this is the main purpose. So copy object, and the object is this one, right? And this data is defined here in our component for the form data. Okay, so this one, we copied this data, and in our show create form, so every time when we open our create form, I'd like to reset this form data, and I'd like to make a copy. So basically do this again, right? So in this case, we can reset our form every time we open the dialog. But this function is created here, but we never use it in our code. So let's go back to our, where is our function? So basically, every time you click on this add new customer button, I'd like to call this function, right? So add click, call this function to show create form. Okay. So let me reload the page, and let's create. You know what? I'd like to reverse the order of these items. I'd like to have the last item here at the first position and on the page one. So we can do it. So this kind of change should be done at the backend. So here is our API. This is function to get the items. And this is the records. So basically, I think I can record store reverse all of these items. So let me check if this is working. So you see, so right now I have the last record, which is the latest one, right? And every time I add a new record, I should have it here at the first position, so we can see what we did to our backend database. So let's try to add another customer. Let's say SAP at sap.com. 123 321 123 SAP. Let's locate the team Berlin. Okay, and let's create. So it's loading, and it's still loading, and now I have SAP created in our database. Okay, so this is kind of improvement for the end users. Okay, and another thing, so when I try to submit, I'd like to also disable this button, and maybe all of this field here, right? We also can do it. So how can we do it? We basically need to do some change in this form. Okay, new customer form, I'd like to take another property here called loading, which is a boolean. Okay, so when the loading property is true, I'd like to disable this button, So disabled equal to true, not to true, to loading. Okay, so when the loading is true, this button should be disabled. And if you like, you also can disable this input, but maybe you can try to solve it. So we have, I think we have multiple ways to do that. Okay. Okay, let me do it here. So we can create a function here, create. So basically create it. So when the component is created, we can check if this loading, if this loading is equal to true. Okay, so we can, if it like this, we can just get rid of it like this, or you can check it like, if it is equal to true, we do something here. What we should do, if you check the components, so basically for all of these components, this item have a property called disabled. So basically, if this disabled is equal to true, it's going to disable the input object, input component. So if in this case, I'd like to object.keys this.form, and for each key, so basically going to loop through the object, right? And this form key dot disabled equal to true. Okay, so if this loading is equal to true, I'm going to set the value or the property for each element in this form data object, and else only if it's true we do it. If it's not, we don't do it. Let me check if this is working. But we need to add these loading properties to this component. So if you check these components in our main file, where is the file? Here, I think. We have this form property, but we don't have the loading added here. So we need to add the loading properties here. Loading. Okay. So let me check if this is working fine. Create a new customer. And this time, let's say another company in my head. Microsoft. I cannot find the company right now in my head. Microsoft.gmail@google.com. 123. Microsoft address is in another city in China. Let's create. As you can see, this button right now is disabled. So that means it's working. Okay. And we have this created successfully. So this is maybe all the improvement that I'd like to make in this video. Okay. And I think this is kind of a break for this project. I'd like to maybe for most of you, you don't know Vue, it's kind of hard for you to understand this process. Okay, and in this part C, I think I only made some improvement, so you can spend more time to understand this project and how to use Vue and to build a project like this in Google Apps Script. And the final part for this project, I think I'm going to add basically to add the last two part of this CRUD application, which is update the record and the delete a record like that, right? So that's going to be the part D. So maybe before we close this meeting, sorry, not the meeting, before we close this video, I'd like to add a column here just to give you a demo to do something like that. So we can add a column here for call some actions like that. So we can have two buttons. Why one is edit, one is delete. So let's just do it. Okay, if I show my camera here, it looks like a meeting. All right, so let me go back to the code here. So basically, to do that, first we'd like to add some columns here. So right now, this is the headers for our table. So I'd like to make a copy of this line and then make a new column here called actions. So basic actions, we're going to take some buttons you can do with this record, right? And we also can grab more information from your backend, just like I did. So maybe you can do something like city, states. You can check, you can make a copy of that. So state, and if you want to get the email, you get the email, right? Just simple like that. And if you want to show the phone at the front, you have the phone. Okay, so let me reload the page. It's going to be a busy table here. So you have all information, your ID, email, phone, description, city, states. I think that's all of them from the backend. And you also can add new columns at your backend, and you can bring them to the front end very easily. Okay, so let's complete the buttons for the actions. So to do that, let's go to the index file and let's find the table. Right here is where we did the table. Okay, so this is the table content here. So basically, I'd like to check if the header is action, right? So let's do a div here, the if header.value is equal to actions. Remember what we did here, headers. So for each header in this list, which have a text and also have a value. So value is equal to actions. That means, so we need to do something here for the header. And else, template v else. So if the header is not the actions, we just keep the original data, right? So here I'd like to add button. So I'd like to use this button here. So this is going to add, I'm going to call it here delete, not delete, edit. Right now just a demo, okay? And also here I'd like to call it delete. And I'm not going to change this function here because that's going to be our last part for this video. And here we're going to have a function called show edit form, and this function is going to be show delete form, just like that. Okay, so edit, and for this button I'd like to apply some class small, and this is for the first one, let's say this is primary. For the delete button, let's say this is danger, or secondary, just a different color. Okay, so I'd also like to apply a class to the deflex, and like what we did here for the justify content between align item center. So let's try to reload. Where is my button? I only have one button here. That's weird. Delete, edit. I should have two buttons. Where is my... Let me check. Okay, this class is weird. Secondary. Okay, maybe it's not space. Let me check what class I should use. Utilities, flex. I think what kind of layout? This one should be better, or the last one evenly. Okay, let's try this one. So you can pick anyone you like. Maybe this one add some margins. So start, and I'd like to place a margin right 3. This should fix the issue. Also apply a margin 3, margin right 3, so we can have a better layout here. Where is my margin? Maybe not margin right, margin position, spacing. Okay, let me check. I think I used it wrong. Okay, not margin right, margin end. So ME. ME. I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with Bootstrap, so I cannot remember all of these classes. So basically, I'm trying to, but I basically know where to find them. So as you can see here, we have this button, but it looks like this is not a small button. Let me, maybe a wrong class I use it. Component, buttons. I think it's a btn small class. Okay, btn secondary. Yes, BT, not btn small, btn sm. I'm totally lost here. And we also can have some icons. I think you can put an icon there to make it looks like a little bit better. But we can do it maybe in the last part. It's not a big deal. Okay, so it looks like much better. So you can, if you click on edit, it should bring you to this form. Basically, because we haven't changed this function here. So basically, it's showing the same form when you click on this add new customer here. So that's the last part of our video, and I'm going to do it at the last part. So as you can see here, the basic structure is already set up. So we only need to handle different functions, maybe for new customer, for edit a customer or delete a customer. We can have a different button here, delete or save your customer data like that. So this is for a new customer. And if we click on this edit, here we're going to change this caption to save. If this is a delete button, I change it to delete, right? So I think that's it for part C. So basically this part C is basically like a break during this this series. Basically we maybe each of these videos is kind of long. It's over 1 hour, so maybe you need to have some time to basically to watch them again, and if you can follow this video and you can do, if you can do exactly the same like I did here, and we can move to part D. Part D could be very easy to do, I think. Okay, but I also need some time to do it. All right, so that's it for today's video. I'm going to see you in the last part. So maybe in the coming days. All right, so see you in the next part. Bye-bye.